Good morning, everyone, and welcome into Wake and Take. It's your boy Jason, and we've got some football to talk about today. Over the holiday weekend, we had some news come out around two star quarterbacks and some injury concerns that we have to break down today. So we're going to talk about Dak Prescott's boot. We're going to talk about Joe Burrow's wrist. And then, of course, answer your questions at the back of the show, so start popping those in. But either way, we've got a good show lined up today. Go ahead, take out your coffee, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. All right, so welcome in, everyone. Dustin, Ryan, everyone tuning in on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, listening on the podcast. Everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. Jamie points out today and really right now, this very second, Scott Fishbowl drafts are kicking off across the country, across the world. People are taking part in one of the greatest fantasy football tournaments. All of the drafts, I believe, kick off now, if I remember correctly. At least the ones that haven't started yet. So if any of you are in Scott Fishbowl, A, congratulations. B, good luck. And C, if you are drafting before the 12 hole, make sure you leave Anthony Richardson for the rest of us drafting at the 12 hole. Come on, guys. Let me get some Anthony Richardson today. I would be excited. But anyway, good luck on that. And, also just hope everyone had a great 4th of July weekend. Your boy got to do some more camping, which is always nice, going up to the Smokies, watching the sunset, seeing the creeks, looking at the trees, great stuff. So I hope you all had a great time as well over the weekend. But again, there were a couple players who did not have a great time over the weekend. And we'll start with Dak Prescott, who actually, did have a good time over the weekend, but was spotted in a walking boot. Why was he seen walking in a walking boot? Well, he was on a little bit of a fishing trip. So we'll break this down. And apparently he wore the boot really out of precaution. But this is the whole situation here. Basically, earlier this week, last week, he was in Cabo, and a picture came out of him wearing a walking boot on like a boat deck. Ian Rappaport tweeted, Cowboys quarterback Dak Prescott, spotted here in a protective walking boot, is dealing with a very minor foot sprain and has been for a few days. It's not considered to be anything that should affect his preparation for 2024. Dak Prescott later came out and said that this was some regular maintenance and that he was wearing this due to an ankle surgery that he had back in 2020 when he fractured his ankle or dislocated. It is a fractured ankle dislocation per the article. So I probably should have fact checked that one. But either way, ankle injury in 2020 that Dak Prescott has come out and said that, he's still wearing this because last time he went deep sea fishing, his ankle swelled up. And this is kind of the same thing. He was going to do some more deep sea fishing. Last time he did it, his ankle swelled up. So he figured, why not just go ahead and put myself in a walking boot out of precaution? So that's really it. That is literally the entire story. Dak Prescott was wearing a walking boot out of precaution because just a day later, another picture came out on Dak Prescott's Instagram story of him walking without said walking boot. This is that. I'll just share that picture just real quick so you can see for yourself, right? So that's it. This is Dak Prescott with I believe someone else, but it doesn't matter. Just some boot boys in Mexico. So he's honestly just kind of making fun of this whole situation in general. But is this really anything to be concerned about in general? I mean, it's still, right? This is him wearing a boot from an injury sustained 4 years ago. Like, that does kind of send some alarms off in your head. Like, are you really still being overly cautious about a 4-year-old injury? It's still swelling up if you go fishing? That doesn't sound great. I'm going to be honest with you. But at the very least, it's also nice to see him being overly cautious, taking the steps to help his ankle that, again, he injured 4 years ago and he's still wearing a fucking walking boot for. But whatever, it's a non-story because he's not in the walking boot anymore. But again, it's just a little concerning in the fact that he has to still kind of take care of his 4-year-old injury. But that's also just how injuries are, right? I mean, we're human. We're only human. We're fragile. We've got very fragile bodies. These are athletes. They play through injuries, even if it's painful, right? That's just what they do. And Dak Prescott, of course, last year had an awesome season, reportedly, I guess, playing through this injury that he still had to wear a walking boot for that's still swelling up if he goes fishing. So I would put it, really as a non-story, but also I still think there is some caution to take in as this is his contract year. This is his final year under contract with the Dallas Cowboys. And it does stand to reason that the Dallas Cowboys see this and don't want to pay top of the market prices, which is going to make them lose Dak Prescott. Injuries do not affect the market in the slightest. We just saw Kirk Cousins get a massive, massive contract coming off an Achilles tear, right? Dak Prescott isn't really coming off of anything. He's just seen walking around in a walking boot. So on the free market, it stands to reason that Dak Prescott's going to make a ton of money if he were to test it, which I assume he would, kind of given this whole Cowboys situation going around right now. I mean, over the weekend, we started hearing Trey Lance hype again. You guys know it. Hey, you've been tuned into Wake and Take. Trey Lance hype here has never stopped since he went to the Cowboys. Told you guys I got a good gut feeling about it. It just makes sense to me that he'll be starting at some point for the Cowboys. Do I think he'll be good? I don't know. I do think that he deserves at least another shot. I don't think he's gotten a fair shake, if you will. I think that there's, he hasn't really ever played football, to be completely honest with you, whether it be injuries, COVID, or anything. Trey Lance just hasn't really been able to see the field. But when it comes to Dak Prescott, I think, when I see this story that this is his last year in a Dallas Cowboys uniform, I do think you'll end up testing the free market. And when I say that, I say sell Dak Prescott and be bold with it as well. Because if you go to Keep Trade Cut right now, you see that he's still valued fairly highly, at least in comparison to his peers. Now, I will say this, his value has gone down over the course of the offseason. I remember earlier this offseason, I took over an orphan and was actually able to trade Dak Prescott straight up for Brock Purdy fairly easily. You can't do a move like that anymore. You're going to have to add at least a little bit, but it's still within striking distance. You could take Dak Prescott and maybe just trade him for Jared Goff plus, right? Like, I think that would be an incredible move if you want to stay kind of within the realm of a high-octane offense, pocket-passing quarterback, older a little bit. Jared Goff, of course, having the added bonus that he just got extended, and we know he's going to be on the Lions for a few more seasons. Or you could just go really far down. And honestly, what I would recommend is taking Dak Prescott for some youth. There were a lot of rookie quarterbacks who came in this year that are not valued very highly right now. J.J. McCarthy, Bo Nix, Michael Penix, Drake May even. I would see what you could get on top of those players for Dak Prescott and just go crazy. I would just go crazy and take a huge risk. Why not? Because Dak Prescott to me is also a huge risk at his age and current value. Again, valued at the quarterback 15. That's not too bad. He was like a quarterback 12 heading before the draft and everything, but still valued very, very highly. And you could even, there's some other like year two quarterbacks, for example, Bryce Young, Will Levis. I think that those are some very interesting pivots as well. But either way, I think I would be looking for some youth with him. But if you do want to stay old, I think Jared Goff is an excellent pivot. Or you can go even older and get Matthew Stafford or Kirk Cousins and see what, kind of cherry on top you could get. And then, of course, if you take the Kirk Cousins route, you might as well go get Michael Penix. And then that checks the youth box as well. But either way, I think that there's a little bit more value in the Dak Prescott tank than what we're going to get for the rest of his career for Dynasty. Even if this boot is not really a big concern. I am, for the most part, writing it off. But I do, it adds just a little bit extra context into what the Dallas Cowboys are seeing in these negotiation rooms and everything. And the fact, again, remains that he's still wearing a boot for an injury that he sustained 4 years ago. That's not great news. But then also, of course, he played through this last year. We saw him have an incredible season. So for the most part, it's a non-story. And again, it's not going to affect his money on the free market at all because we just saw Kirk Cousins get a massive contract. So he's probably still going to be on another team next year. I just really think that this is it for the Cowboys. But we'll see, right? I mean, a ton of things can happen. Either way, though, I do classify him as a sell, even if he's back on the Cowboys. I mean, he's 31 years old, and he's valued around the range of some like 25, 26-year-old quarterbacks. I would rather get the youth. Or if I want an older quarterback, just go even older and see what extra value I could get on top. Because this Cowboys team in general kind of has some weird stuff going on, at least in terms from a football perspective. From fantasy, they're killing it, right? But they keep losing in the playoffs. And while that's a dream for a lot of teams to be able to lose in the playoffs, that is a nightmare for the Cowboys. And we see it, right, with Jerry Jones consistently kind of being like, well, we want some playoff wins here. And Dak Prescott's not bringing that. And of course, neither is McCarthy. So, there's some changes brewing on this Cowboys team. I believe you can kind of sense it with all these contract situations going on. They can't keep Micah Parsons, CeeDee Lamb, and Dak Prescott. Something's going to have to give. I honestly think it'll be Dak Prescott. As they've had, these times now, they've had Dak Prescott in his prime. They didn't win playoff games, and that is their biggest metric down in Dallas. I know he's been good for yards. I know he's been a good quarterback, but at the end of the day, they want to win Super Bowls in Dallas, and Dak Prescott has not done that. So, again, I say buy Trey Lance while he's super cheap, but also take a huge risk. Sell Dak Prescott. Go crazy. get some youth or get some of the older quarterbacks that have, a similar season-to-season ceiling like a Kirk Cousins or Matthew Stafford with great weapons on a good offense. You can get some really, really good value out of Dak Prescott right now. So let's go ahead and hop into the chat, see if there are any questions about this particular subject. Looks like no. Looks like lots of Scott Fishbowl chat. You guys, if you see anything going on in your league, by the way, let me know some of these draft picks. I see it looks like Christian McCaffrey went 101 somewhere, but I saw that on Twitter, which is pretty interesting. But I am curious how that's going. But either way, thanks for tuning in, keeping the chat going. Scott Fishbowl, some very exciting stuff. And, we need to know about the quarterbacks, especially in a super flex league. So Joe Burrow's interesting, I think, is a little bit more concerning than Dak Prescott's. Joe Burrow, of course, sustained a season-ending wrist injury last year, and there have been multiple reports bubbling up over the summer about the severity of this injury. First off, or I guess honestly, let's just go ahead and go through it and what we know. I have, kind of gone through everything, and we're just going to lay it out before we get into opinions. So essentially, Joe Burrow had a season-ending wrist injury last year. What was that wrist injury? Well, some sources, according to the Cincinnati Enquirer, say that it was a torn scapholunate ligament, the SL ligament within the wrist. Sorry if there are any health professionals in here. I tried my best. Scapholunate, maybe? Scapholunate? Either way, doesn't matter. S ligament in the wrist. What is that? Well, according to the Midwest Orthopedics at Rush, Dr. Xavier Simcock, the hand, wrist, elbow surgeon at that hospital, the scapholunate ligament is essentially the ACL for the wrist. More than likely, it is like kind of one of the more important ligaments of the wrist. It kind of is the one that's also injured the most within the wrist as well. Well, what is the kind of recovery for this type of injury? And well, it varies. If it's just kind of a sprain or anything, then it could really just be a few week recovery. But in this case, it is a tear that Joe Burrow did actually have to have surgery on. Last November, he did successfully have arthroscopy or wrist surgery. And according to Sports MD, return to contact sports can be considered after the surgery starting at 6 months, but the recovery could also take up to 18 months, which is, concerning. 6 to 18 month window is a wide range of outcomes. So let's continue. What is the success rate of this surgery then, if it's got a kind of a long range of outcomes? Well, we have two sources here. One, there was Bradley Beal, a basketball player for the Washington Wizards a couple seasons ago, suffered this injury as well. And there was an interview with a Dr. Rosemarin, kind of talked about what this kind of means for the player by a Washington Wizards beat writer. And basically, the doctor said, I'm not sure exactly what repair he had, as there are about 20 different procedures to address this injury. But the success rate of this surgery is only 75 to 80%, even with the best of surgeons. The thing is that with many of these repairs, they fall apart either a year or 5 years after surgery, really. So while a surgery can be successful, generally what they see from this is that it fails later, that it eventually unsucceeds, if you will. So I did some more digging. The National Library of Medicine actually backs this up. They had a whole study going on, and I'll actually read through the whole abstract. So the background was, the aim of the study was to determine the outcomes in relation to return to play in professional athletes who had undergone a scapholunate ligament reconstruction. We searched our prospectively managed database and identified 15 professional athletes who had undergone the modified procedure for scapholunate instability. They were contacted to complete a telephone interview that they established the duration between the operation and return to play, the level of competition before and after the procedure, and if applicable, reasons for reduction in the level of competition. The results were as followed. Between 2008 and 2011, 15 professional male athletes underwent the surgery. One was lost to follow-up, so essentially one didn't follow up with the experiment at all. But 14 were contactable. 11 of them were rugby players, 2 of them were boxers, and 1 of them was a golfer. The mean age of the participants was 30 years, with some people as low as 18, some as old as 42. And they followed up with these players over a range of 25 months. 11 of the 14 athletes, so 79%, returned to play within 4 months of the surgery. And then by the final review, 9 of the 14, so 64%, had returned to play at their pre-injury level of competition. So the conclusion drawn from this experiment was that a majority of professional athletes returned to competitive playing within 4 months of undergoing this reconstruction, and approximately 2/3 returned to play at their pre-injury level of competition. So essentially, about 80% of players will be able to return to playing. 66% will be able to return to the level of play before their injury, which of course leads to some concerns, especially when brought into the fact that it was talked about by Dr. Rosemarin that, a lot of these repairs tend to fall apart over time. It is even more concerning when you see the fact that there's almost no precedent for this injury among quarterbacks. An NFL article went as follows. Joe Burrow said at the beginning of the recovery process, he was flying blind. Unlike other injuries, such as the strained calf he sustained at the start of 2023, in which he was able to consult with Aaron Rodgers, he hasn't come across any players at his position that has suffered this injury. The guys that I've talked to have been O-linemen, defensive linemen, and linebackers that don't need to have the wrist mobility and little intricacies of the wrist movement like I do. He did go on to add that the training staff within the Bengals has done a really good job to maintain Burrow's throwing motion, and said that his rehab has been lights out so far. And he also notes that he did begin throwing in April, and his quarterback's coach, Irwin, at the Cincinnati Bengals, has said that his velocity on his throws hasn't diminished despite the wrist injury and all that stuff, which is, of course, good to hear. Joe Burrow also goes on to decline to even answer the question, though, if he is in pain. He declined to say if his wrist was hurting when he threw. However, he is happy with the progress at the stage of his recovery and feels comfortable with any risks of playing with it moving forward. The quote itself, I think most of those points are behind us. We're kind of at the end of the 6 to 7 months that it's going to take. And so at this point, it's just about getting ready to play football, and it will continue to get better. The Pro Bowl quarterback noted that he took up piano during wrist rehab, which has helped with his dexterity as he recovers from the latest injury. The full quote, I am learning the piano right now. Hopefully I can get pretty good at that by next offseason. I guess it'll be pretty tough during the season, but it's helped my rehab for my wrist. That's something I want to get good at. I've always wanted to learn how to play, but this was an opportune time to work on my hand and wrist dexterity while also learning piano. Kind of a perfect storm. So Joe Burrow is, being a little bit different in his approach to recovery. But also, this is a very severe injury. When you look into it for baseball pitchers, there wasn't like too much information out there, but a lot of people do kind of deem it, at least career threatening, which is, I think, a fair way to put it, especially with the concerns for a quarterback, especially with just falling on it the wrong way. That's kind of my main concern when I look into this is I don't doubt it, right? Like Joe Burrow is one of the toughest sons of guns in this sport. We've seen it time and time again. He consistently plays through injuries, and he consistently wants to do nothing more than to just be out there on the football field. And because of that, I do truly believe that Joe Burrow will be out there this season. I truly believe that Joe Burrow will be out there this season playing through his wrist injury, regardless of if it hurts or not. Like he said, he declined to say if it was hurting, which makes me believe it hurts. But I also believe that Joe Burrow is the type of player to play through it. He's a world-class athlete, a world-class competitor, and wants nothing more than to play football. However, the concerns about him re-injuring this are huge to me. I'm not going to lie. I am a huge Joe Burrow defender. I love the guy. He's been electric to watch and fun to watch and a great personality. But he has been injured time and time again. And this wrist injury, again, doesn't have the best success rate in throughout, I guess a 66% is pretty solid for an injury, right? Like that, not great. But still, 2/3 of the players being able to return to their pre-injury level is awesome to hear. But it is not great to hear that, most of these repairs fall apart within a year to 5 years of the surgery, which means for the most part, this wrist surgery and reconstruction for Joe Burrow kind of has an expiration date, which makes you concerned in Dynasty, which is why, to be completely honest with you, I might be selling Joe Burrow if I can get the right return, which, it pains me. I love Joe Burrow. I really, really do. But his value right now is quarterback 6. On keep trade cut. He's not going any higher. He's not. Even if he wins an MVP season, for fantasy football purposes, he's just not the type of quarterback to jump into that top 5 range, unless an injury maybe. But then even then, what would Joe Burrow have to do to pass Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, CJ Stroud, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes? He would have to throw for 6,000 yards and 50 touchdowns. Like that's what he would have to do. And it's just not going to happen, even with Jamar Chase. So this is technically his ceiling, as much as I hate to admit it. And so I would be looking at what type of return I could get for him. My only, pause is that this has probably made it harder to deal Joe Burrow and get the right return. So I would just, maybe put him on the block and see what you could get. I don't want to sell low, but, here's kind of some ideas here. Jordan Love, Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence, Kyler Murray. Those 4 quarterbacks, seeing what you can get on top of them is my starting point. If you can get any of those 4 with a cherry on top, I'm very much all over it. If you want to, be a little bit more risky, that's where I might pump the brakes. Like, I don't want to do a 1-for-1 swap for Caleb Williams. I'm not going to do that. And I don't really know if I want Jaden Daniels plus. I do want a quarterback who's actually shown us something. So maybe you could go a little bit further down into the Brock Purdy range. But that might be a little too far. I genuinely want Jordan Love, Justin Herbert, Kyler Murray, or Trevor Lawrence. I want one of those 4 quarterbacks with something on top to make me feel truly comfortable. I'm okay exploring a Jaden Daniels plus trade. I'm just not sure what that plus would have to be to make me comfortable, and I just don't think you'd get it, completely honest with you right now. So anyway, that's kind of where my head's at on these 2 situations. Dak Prescott, a sell and get funky with it. Joe Burrow, probably also a sell, but be cautious with it. Don't just sell him for anything. Make sure you're getting the right return. And I wouldn't tear down too far. Again, I think the lowest I would go is Trevor Lawrence, but maybe a Brock Purdy, Jared Goff, if you feel really good about it. But I don't know. I would almost say to just be completely risky and try a Will Levis, Bryce Young in that range, or one of the cheaper rookies. But I think, in fact, I know I want Kyler Murray, Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence, or Jordan Love, and whatever cherry I can get on top. I don't want to tear down too much from a player like Joe Burrow at all, even with these concerns. And again, just to kind of sum this up, the main thing here is that Joe Burrow seems to be healthy, will be playing through this wrist injury regardless of how bad it is, but it does carry re-injury risk. And with him being a quarterback, I think I'm more so worried that he just falls on it wrong, right? That's what I'm worried about. He just gets sacked, puts his wrist down to break his fall, and then that's what I'm worried about. But I do love Joe Burrow. I think he's a tough player, and I think that he's going to want to do whatever he can to get out there, as evidenced by him learning piano, right? Some people are laughing about that, but I think it makes sense, right? I mean, you got to keep your hands above the keys. You got to move them around. You got to kind of do some things. So I could see how that helps, not only physically, but also mentally. Testing your brain to do a lot more things is always really, really cool. So I like the fact that he's trying something different. Obviously, like Tua last year, he started doing martial arts. It's cool to hear these players try, unique ways to recover. But that's all I've got for you guys. I guess let's go ahead and hop into the chat, see if we have any questions. Thank you, Donald. Thank you, Donald. I have terrible allergies. I'm sure a lot of you know it, based on my shows and everything now. But yeah, I have some sniffles. Very, very bad sniffles. There you go. Space Monkey got Trey Lance for free and a single QB. Hey, why not? Why not? There you go. Anthony Richardson just went 101. Yeah, I saw that Cody Carpentier was doing that, and I don't hate it at all with this scoring. Mark Reveler says he has the Burrow Chase stack in a few leagues. I'm not worried about him. I buy him on the low. Yeah, I mean, if you can get him on the low, but I just don't think you can't. Again, like I said, I do believe that this is going to be a weird time to try to sell him. But if you can still get similar return to what you could have gotten a couple weeks ago, I think I'm doing it. I think I'm doing it. And he's still quarterback 6 on keep trade cut as of this morning. So I do think that, while Joe Burrow is probably fine, as Donald says, he's a pimp. And while you're probably right, you can't sell him now. You got to wait till he has a 3-touchdown game. I also think that it's worth exploring now, starting the conversations. That way, if he does have that 3-touchdown game, the guy that you already had at the end of your line is like, whoa, okay, all right, fine. I'll pay the price that you wanted. I am still saying to drive a hard bargain. I don't want you to just give up on Joe Burrow, but I do think that there is a few pathways to accrue that value and be okay, right? Like Jordan Love, Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence, Kyler Murray. I think that those are 4 great quarterbacks with good offenses, with similar types of ceilings as Joe Burrow, similar youth as well. And so I think that it's worth it. As much as it pains me to say it, I think it's worth it. Those are the guys I would be exploring. But that should be it. Thank you again, Donald, for the stinging nettle for allergy suggestion. I'll look into that. Could definitely use it. I should also probably just start taking allergy pills in the morning. Life. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. It's another fun episode of Wake and Take. Don't forget to hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe to Player Profiler. Don't forget to follow me on social media at JFootballWine, wherever you get it. And of course, don't forget to check out the Wake and Take podcast via the link in the description. You can listen to it wherever you get your podcasts if you cannot catch the live show. Thanks again, guys. Hope you all had a wonderful holiday weekend. Hope you all have a magnificent Monday, and hope you all enjoy the rest of your week. I will see you all tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern with some Mike Lindbergh action. Peace.
Hey, I want to thank you for being part of this broadcast. If you have any thoughts on it, leave a comment. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a like. And if you want to see more shows on the Player Profiler channel, subscribe to it. That's how we know you want more.